Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Untitled Project Podcast, a podcast that I'm still very much figuring out that also happens to be about figuring things out. We're just about in the middle of May, and as I'm filming this, we currently have had 20 plays all time and 10 Spotify followers. Very exciting moving into a new platform, and thank you to everyone that tuned into the first episode. Today we've upgraded a little bit, and I am testing out new audio. Yeah, still figuring out this whole podcasting thing, but welcome. You are now listening to the second episode of the Untitled Project Podcast. I'm very excited today to introduce a new topic. This is a topic that's been a long time coming, something that I've been working in the background on for years, and I'm so excited to finally bring that onto my channel, and that topic is acting. We're gonna go into my first time on set as an actor. In today's episode, we're gonna talk about how I got to this point, the experience of being on set, tips for breaking into acting and film, and also how to get somewhere from what feels like ground zero. So we all have something that we really want that is also probably really out of our comfort zone, and for many years this was 100% me. So maybe we have a lot of limiting beliefs, subconscious even, about the idea of starting something new. That is a super universal feeling, so we're going to be diving into all of that today. So I want you to think about that something, what that something is for you now. Okay, got something? Great, let's get straight into it. So I'm going to start off with some background, and I'm going to try to not go into too much depth. So let's just start from, for a while and for many different reasons, I did have this dream of being an actor. I talked a little bit about this in my first episode. That was super kind of latent, like dormant, I guess. And we're just gonna fast forward straight to my first acting class, which was right after COVID. And basically COVID lockdown was ending, so everything that was online was coming back to be in person. And something that COVID really taught me firsthand is that you really shouldn't wait on the things that you want, because you never know how the world can change in an instant. And at that point I kind of came to a realization that no limiting belief that you have is reason enough to not try something that you want. So I took my first acting class in New York City. I was in my third year of college at NYU. Just want to point out that none of my acting training was done at NYU, which was intentional. I wanted to keep my NYU tuition and my NYU education as a degree that could for sure land me a job. And since I'm in New York City, I had so many good resources outside of NYU to learn acting. So that's what I did. I didn't know really much about acting at all, so I wanted to learn how acting is taught and what to look for and what to avoid in a class. So I did a lot of research, and that brought me to my first class, which was a beginner Meisner technique class at a studio called, I think it was literally called the Acting Studio NYC. So I took this class throughout the winter. I think it ended towards the end of the year. And this class really affirmed my interest in acting. It's conquered a lot of stage fright, realized it wasn't so bad, and I didn't really need to be so nervous for this, and that there's people from all walks of life and all different ages that also want to start, and it's really not that big of a deal. That's where I developed my first real understanding of what acting is and what acting isn't. So I wanted to continue. But I wanted to try something else. So flash forward to 1 year later, I am just starting my last year of college at NYU. I'm taking classes at the Barrow Group, which is another studio in New York. Eventually, I'm also tack on classes from another studio called T. Schreiber, and that took me pretty much till near graduation. I took a break from acting classes and I started going on sets. Started getting some set experience, did some crew work, did some PAing, production assistant, producer, directing my own shorts on a smaller scale, acting in some NYU student sets here and there, also on a smaller scale. But it was really nice getting hands-on and doing the work and meeting a lot of people. So then after I graduated and I started my job, I moved on to evening classes at Stella Adler, where I took their technique class and I took a scene study class. And then most recently this year in 2024, at the start of the year, I started taking classes at a studio called The Atlantic, and I took their technique class, and I also took an on-camera like audition workshop. And if you're wondering what the difference between all these techniques and all these studios are, these are all just like different approaches to acting that are all kind of based on the same foundation. This March, 1.5 months ago, I did my first 2 auditions. I did one in-person audition, which was for this 1-year conservatory program at the Atlantic. And then I filmed and sent in my first self-tape. And both ended in success. I got a spot in the 1-year conservatory. And the self-tape also landed me my first role in an indie short film. So this past April, the week of my 23rd birthday, I got my first set of acting headshots. And for my birthday, my roommates gifted me an audition setup. In about a month, I will be starting a summer intensive at a studio called William Esper, which will bring us right into fall, and the start of the 1-year conservatory. I literally lost my voice talking about that, but anyway, that is the high-level overview of my acting journey so far and how we got here. All of that out of the way, you guys are brought up to speed about what's been going on behind the scenes. Now let's get into the actual heart of the episode, which was my first time on set as a paid actor. And then, of course, I want to get into some takeaways and some things I've come to realize about the process of going after and starting towards things that are outside of your comfort zone. So fast forward to getting the role. They let me know by email. And we had a lot of communications via email. Through email, we did like info and contracts and release forms. They sent over the script, and it was a short. So I think the script was like 12 pages. And a little bit about the film. This was an independent film made by a small production company that makes a lot of social satire films, and they're usually like comedy. So this was a really funny short about this bar and all the patrons in the bar. And it's kind of got this rogue and quirky little ensemble cast. My part was pretty short and really low maintenance, so like I wasn't worried about that part. And as the film drew close, there was some emailing back and forth with preparation for the upcoming set, so talking transportation, hair and makeup and costuming, any last minute changes to the script. And then the call sheet was sent out on the night before. The call sheet is basically like the schedule of everything that is being shot, as well as like all the information about the cast and crew. Okay, so now we've made it to the day of. So I was on set this past Sunday, and I think the set was like 4 days in total to get this film made, and I was only needed on the last day. So Sunday morning, it was May 12th, I got ready at around like 6:30 and commuted to this spot in Manhattan. The van in charge of picking up the Manhattan group was waiting, and the Manhattan van took us to the Airbnb that we were filming in Jersey. It was like this historical, gorgeous Airbnb that was like by a creek, and since this was the 4th and last day on set, everything in the house was already set up. So when I walked in, it looked just like this really quirky dive bar, kind of exactly how I pictured it in my head. Mostly everything was like set up, everyone was there because the crew arrives earlier than the actors to get everything ready. And we went to the holding area where like the rest of everyone was, so I got to meet everyone in person that I had been emailing with about. I also met like a lot of people in the car. Met some of the actors, some of the crew, and the producers. Everyone on the set was super nice. So chilling in the holding area, eating like breakfast, whatever. Then in a bit, I went in for hair and makeup, and they planned this really cute look. Got me in a really cute outfit. It was like a super Gen Z kind of look. After we were all set with our hair and makeup and wardrobe, the guy on sound came to mic us up. Pretty shortly after that, the assistant director came over and grabbed me and my scene partner and called us onto the set. We had a little discussion with the director. So yeah, he walked us through the character, any changes, as well as the blocking, which is basically any of the movements that's going to happen in the scene. Camera, lighting, and sound were all getting set up. And then after a bit of shuffling, when everything was ready, we did the whole lights, camera, action thing. So at that point, everything is set up and the assistant director will yell quiet on set, and then she'll do a quick check-in to see if camera and sound are ready, and they'll confirm, so they'll say camera speeds, sound speeds. And then at that point, the second AC will come into the shot with the slate, verbally naming the scene. So scene alpha, take 1, and clap. Everybody settles and the director calls for action, and we go in for the take. But the first take was kind of just like, okay, cool, like let's see it. And so we saw it, and then the director made a few adjustments, things like timing and cues, things that he wanted to accentuate. There were a couple changes to the scene, so we ended up like improvising a couple bits. So we took account of his notes, went in for another take. Then I think we did maybe another 1 or 2 variations, and then we were all set. That was the scene. So after the scene, we headed back to the holding area where all the other actors that like weren't needed were chilling on their downtime, and we weren't going to be up again for a while. In this downtime, I got to chat a lot with a lot of different people, members of the cast and crew, ask them what they were interested in, what are their day jobs, fun things that they're working on. That's always the fun thing about set, is that you're basically in a room with people for like 12 plus hours at a time, so you come out of it with friends. During the downtime, I also got to see some of the other scenes being made. I got to see the actors perform, and I got to take some like BTS photos. So for the rest of the evening, there were a bunch of ensemble like group shots. Basically, we just went over like blocking and some really minor improv, and we did the same scene basically a bunch of different times to get the coverage from all these different angles. I think we went an hour over, so we wrapped it around like 6:30. Long story short, I ended up getting home at like 10:40 probably, back to Manhattan, and I was so tired. I wasn't even one of the main actors, so they must have been, I don't know, maybe they're used to it or something. But honestly, I don't think I've ever been on a set that hasn't ran overtime. But yeah, so that's the story time. Super fun. That is literally what happens on like an indie film when you show up to set, for those of you that were curious. Of course, there's the whole other like personality side to it. So a lot of the day is like getting to know people. I feel like a huge thing with set is like you start in a room with a bunch of people that are like strangers, or maybe you know their name by email. So you put a face to the name, but by the end of set, you just feel like you know each other so much more because you spent like the past 10 hours in the same room with them. Had a lot of fun, you know, with everyone and doing like the ensemble stuff, especially because it was a comedy. It was so funny watching everyone work and do their little improv bits. Reminded me why I love acting in the first place. With that being said, let's get into some takeaways and some like larger themes that I want to talk about. I think a big takeaway for me is, and this is something that I've always known, but the importance of confidence as not just a quality, but a skill. If you are a creative or if you are an artist in this day and age, confidence is indeed a skill. It will impact the way that you work and the way that you communicate. And this is something that's really important for me because confidence is something that I struggle with. A lot of the times you do have to fake it till you make it. Another example of this is imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is very much a you versus you battle. You versus yourself. No one is going to come save you except for yourself, unfortunately. So you have to figure out how to be your own best friend and your own biggest advocate. And that is something that, you know, the lead in this short, we were chatting a lot in our downtime, and one piece of advice from her was other people can help represent you, but first and foremost, you have to be your own biggest advocate and your biggest supporter. You've just got to get to that point on your own first. I'm gonna tell you a little anecdote. There was a point during my scene where, so there was like a last minute change in my line, and like I flubbed the line basically because I said the old version, and then I got like really in my head about it. Even afterwards, you know, everyone was saying great things about the scene, saying it was really funny, the director was really happy with it, like everything positive. But like I was still stuck in my head about that one mistake that I made that probably nobody even gave a second thought. But in my head, I was just letting it build into this whole thing. Unfortunately, I do have a tendency to sometimes be my own worst enemy. But if I really look at the situation objectively, even if you do make a mistake, so what? Like, who's perfect and who's even asking for perfection? And as long as you're going on your way, you're going to make mistakes, and it's not an indicator that like you are somehow less than other people. So after thinking about that, I realized how silly I was being to be so caught up over that tiny thing compared to all the amazing things and all the amazing memories and moments that were happening all around me. During the downtime, a lot of the actors were chatting, and along with that piece of advice about being your own biggest advocate, a lot of them were saying, don't depend on others, larger structures to help you make art, like make your own things, instead of depending on the larger industry, because I feel like a lot of the times you can let yourself get stopped by things that are outside of your control. It's important to remember that you are the creator and you can create. You can get together with your friends and you can make your own film and you can make your own work and you can write and produce your own thing. Is it easy? No, of course not. But there are always ways that you can allow yourself to work without being at the mercy of industry giants. Everyone knows that that can be a very soul-sucking aspect of the career. I think overall, this set was super affirming in a way where by the end of the set, I was so tired. All that work just for probably 30 seconds or less of screen time. But it was exhausting. I mean, that is how film sets work, right? Like several hours, months even, to produce like a couple minutes of like what will be finalized. But it was extra affirming in a way where like when I got home, I was so exhausted, like physically, also mentally, because keep in mind you are kind of like on for over 12 hours. But I just had this feeling of accomplishment and satisfaction that I do not get from so many other things. I don't get it from my job. I don't necessarily get it from hanging out with people. It was a satisfaction that made all the tiredness not only worth it, but almost like feel good. It's the feeling of like you went ahead and you created something that kind of awakens your soul and makes you feel alive. And you just went and you did another thing to grow in that direction. And so that satisfaction to me is so valuable. So those are kind of my takeaways from the set. And now I want to move on to some tips and advice on how to get into something new, starting from zero, and especially for things that are way out of your comfort zone. So how do you get into something? Okay. Where there is a will, there's a way. And that is your mantra. I'm going to give you guys a quick analogy, and I'm just going to be throwing out the numbers here, okay? When the thought crossed in my mind that I wanted to be an actor, I was probably like 1 in a million, right? But of that 1 million, let's totally grabbing at random numbers here, but let's say maybe only half of those people actually follow through on that and show up in an acting class and get started on their training. Then you are 1 in 500,000. And then let's say only half of those people that bother to show up to a class are putting themselves out there and auditioning for things and willing to put their skills to practical use. Throw in one last example to tie things up. Let's say out of those 250,000 people, only half of them are able to keep up with auditioning over and over again for years, right? Until they finally book something. So at one point you were 1 in a million when it was a thought in the back of your head, and suddenly after following through on all these actions and growing, you went from being 1 in a million to 1 in like a much smaller number. I mean, again, throwing out random numbers here, but you guys get the point. My point is that even for things that are not in your favor, there is so much that is within your control that you can do to advance yourself, even when it feels like there are so many factors that you can't control. Another really important thing to keep in mind is patience, that these things really take time. That's exactly how it's been for me. It's been a super gradual process. There have been so many times, like countless times, where I've literally cried myself to sleep out of frustration, how big the gap was between my reality and where it was that I wanted to be. It just takes time. Good things take time. In the meantime, you can work on cultivating your confidence and your belief in yourself that you are going in the right direction. That is something that you're going to need to keep yourself going, is to be the one giving yourself a pat on the back and be the one that sees your own potential, because it's not For most people, a career in the thing that you want most is not just going to appear out of thin air. But you gotta just do what you can and trust the process. That is your job. It's not worrying about the outcome. It is simply doing your best and trusting the process. 2 things that you can always work on to show up for your biggest dreams. The large point of this video, the reason why I'm making it, is that where there's a will, there's a way. Learn to act on your will rather than your limiting beliefs. When you do that, you have no idea how far you will go. Acting on your will rather than your limiting beliefs or your self-doubt, that is how you change. That is how you get chances, and that is how you get from point A to point B. If you are putting in the work, that effort and that energy, it is going somewhere, and it will come back to you. Oh my gosh, bear with me. I cannot deal with technology sometimes. My camera just died, and the other battery I think is broken or something. So I had to switch the setup completely. That is a reason for the stark change. I did only have this last bit, but I needed to get it in. So if nobody has told you this, then let me be the first. Take a chance on yourself. I'm going to tell you guys right now that if you want something, in my book, wanting something is reason enough to go after it. Because at the end of the day, this is our one shot at life. So the next time that something is stopping you or getting in your way, ask if that thing is really more important than you living your best life in this one opportunity to do so. When I was a student at the Barrow Group, the second acting studio that I went to, I was in the elevator with this girl, and I noticed we were heading up to the same floor, which was the studio. So I asked her what class she was in, and she said she was in their conservatory. Years ago, I looked that up, and I dreamed about it, but I didn't know at all how to get there. Well, turns out it would take time. It would take lots of time. Over the course of the next year and a half, I would try 3 whole new studios, whole new techniques, before finding a studio that I really resonated with and felt comfortable in. And then it would just take one random afternoon at a cafe for me to realize that they offer an evening conservatory, something that I could afford and that I could sustain while doing my day job. But wanting it is planting the seed that finally, in this March, became the audition, that finally became the spot. It is always going to be scary before you do it, but afterwards, and only afterwards, will you realize that you were always capable of doing it. If you take anything from this video, it's that if you want something, and I know you want that something, don't let anything stop you. Of course, as long as you are a moral and law-abiding citizen, most of the time. The energy that you put into something, it will all come back to you in some way. You're not going to know what your path looks like really, but you have to have enough faith to blindly continue on it. All right, so thank you guys so much for listening today. It's been really exciting getting this podcast up and running. I have gotten feedback from people in my life that I like to talk a lot, so this is actually a really good outlet for me to talk about things. And of course, if you guys have any ideas for topics or questions, things that you want to dive into, feel free to send them my way. And if you are watching this video version on YouTube, it would mean the world to me if you subscribe to this channel and gave this video a like and a comment. And if you're listening to the audio version of this on Spotify, you would absolutely make my day by giving the Spotify a rating and a follow. You can follow my Instagram, which is just my name, Bridgette Gong, for more updates. Also have 2 playlists for some good music. Until I see you again, good luck with figuring things out, because that is what I will be doing too. So until next time.